Okay, so today we're going to look at wiring, and to do this we'll be going through a few different plants because different plants it's the same wiring technique, but sometimes it's a little bit harder to do some plants than others. So the one I have here will be a relatively simple wiring job, which will be the one I'll start with. But very first off, let's have a look at the wires. So Bonsai Wire, most people will order it in a dark brown anodized aluminium or copper, but copper does cost a lot more. I just have silver at the moment, but I will be getting some dark in both for sale and for my own personal use. But the silver is a lot cheaper. So I've got it in 4 different sizes here. So I have a 1.4 mil, a 0.7 millimeter, a 3 millimeter. Actually, I think that was 1.6, and that one is my 1 millimeter. So typical sizes are 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes a 1.5 or something mixed in between. So I've just got a bit of an assortment here. And there's some rule of thumbs about choosing the wire that you should use. So if you look at a branch, typically the wire should be approximately half the thickness of the branch. So for that particular branch there, this wire is a little bit too thick potentially. However, this wire, the 0.7, is too thin. And the easy way of telling if a wire will hold a branch is just to take a straightened out piece and push down on the branch, and if the wire bends, which it is in this case, the wire is not strong enough. If I go back up to this size here and I push down, it's the branch starts to bend before the wire. Although the wire is bending a little bit with that, that will be the one that I will use on this particular branch. Likewise, if I was to go up to my 2 millimeter and try this branch, so I push down on that and the wire bends quite freely before the tree does. So if I go up to my 3 mil and I push down, we can see that the tree is definitely bending first. So a simple way of telling if your wire will hold is just to do that press test. Now you can also double up wire. So if I particularly want to use this finer wire, I could potentially do 2 runs. Now I don't think this will be strong enough still, but I've got 2 bits of wire there and I'm pushing down, and although I'm getting reasonable movement on the branch, that's probably barely strong enough for that branch. But you can always double up, which sometimes is easier than doing thicker wires depending on the branch thickness. So when we wire, we will normally, first of all, if we need to bend the trunk, we will do the trunk. This one doesn't really need to be bent because it's already got some nice shape in it, but I'm going to wire it up just for the sake of example. Now some people are quite skilled and can hold the wire over their wrist and sort of twist it. I prefer just to take a piece off, so roll it out to a little bit longer than the section that I'll be doing, and chop it off with some wire cutters. Now I've temporarily misplaced my wire cutters, so I'm just using a pair of pliers at the moment. If I'm doing a trunk like this, I'll normally stick the wire a reasonable distance down into the base, into the soil as my starting point. And I can quite literally, it doesn't really matter if I bend left or right in this particular situation, but you may be able to see I'm supporting there with my finger and thumb on the wire and trunk so that I'm not putting direct pressure onto the tree. I'm actually supporting the wire as I go so that I'm basically trying to reduce as much pressure as I can on this tree. And I'll just get it started. So we'll typically aim for about a 45 to 60 degree angle, and that can be adjusted to fit between where your leaves and branches are. You'll find that once you start going up a branch, a consistent angle will always land between the leaves or the other offshoots. So we should try and avoid ever crushing leaves and branches. So I've got some branches coming out the back there, so I'm just going to try and get in between them. I'm trying to be conscious that I'm showing you what I'm doing while trying to be able to see what I'm doing at the same time. So I'm just trying to get between that clump of branches there, which I have. So hopefully you can see that I've gone above and below that group of branches, and then I'll support the wire again and continue to go up. So for me, I swap hands as I'm going around. Now, if you're planning on bending in a particular way, it's actually good to try and bend the trunk into that direction as you're doing it, just to add a little bit more complexity, but that will mean that your wire is already doing a lot of the bend as you're going through. So I'm just giving this some downward movement. Okay, so I've basically got that bottom part of my branch trunk wired up as I would like it. It wasn't really essential, as I said, and I'm just going to try and get a little bit more bend into this area here. So I'm going to support it with a finger on the bending point where I want, and I'm actually putting both fingers, so I've got one above, one below, and then I'm just supporting and gently applying pressure, and I'm going quite slowly because if I can feel a crack or anything, I need to stop immediately. If you do crack a branch, it's not the end of the world. It will normally heal up quite nicely, but we try to avoid it. Although I have on the odd occasion done intentional cracks because I wanted a fairly distressed look. Okay, so I've just added some more movement, flowing that out and around. My next thing I want is for this branch to come down, and I'll also be doing these other branches. So we'll be moving to a lighter gauge wire. So this was my 1.4, which wasn't strong enough, and this one I think was my 2mm, which is strong enough. Now when we're doing branches, we try to do them in pairs. So if I take two branches of approximately the same size, I'll take this branch, and I'm going to use them to basically support each other. So the tension, although I've got some trunk in between, of this branch will also be pushing through the wire on this, so they'll be supported independently. Now, another thing to bear in mind is when you approach a branch, you can either start off on the top or on the bottom, and depending on which way you're going to bend it, or you could even go left and right, will vary where you should aim to put that first section. So if I want to push my branch downward, I want my wire on the top. If I want to push it up, I would put my wire underneath, and that will help to assist the cracking at the joint of the two branches. So what I'll do is take enough wire to go out, across, down and back up. And this wire is pretty easy to bend in these thicknesses, so I'm going to be bending this branch down a little. So I'm starting on the top, and again I'm supporting the branch and the wire, and I'll just get in nice and tight at the start there. I'll show you in a moment what that looks like. So we've got that in nice and tight to the bend. Now, something that I should have factored in before, but it's alright, we can work with it. The direction I've wound my initial wire means for me to follow down to this next branch, I have to go back around and follow it the same way, which means that this will need to come down and around. It's not the end of the world, but it sort of means my plan to come on top of the branch where I have actually come on top, I'm now also underneath it. Okay, not a big deal, but sometimes it does make it a bit harder. You can see now as I'm moving this wire down here, the branch up high is moving, so I still need to be supporting that branch as we're going down. So I've reached my next branch down, and I'm coming in from the top again because I'll be pushing it downward. And because this branch was quite close in, I'm actually going to just sort of move it down so I can really get in tight there. And just hold that in with my finger. Just trying to make sure I don't pinch any other leaves or branches into this. So I'm going to hold this down. It's a bit awkward trying to show you and do it at the same time. So I'm getting my wire tight and now moving my branch down, supporting the wire and holding the branch with my other finger and coming around. Now I'm actually going to probably lapse over that branch. I'm just pulling a couple of bits off here without intention because I'm working on strange angles. Okay, so I've managed to get myself around and over my first little offshoot there, and again supporting it, the branch from behind, coming around and holding my branch down. I will come over the top and we'll just gradually work our way up, trying to support and bend as we're going. Not always the easiest, but with a bit of practice you'll be able to do this. So wiring is something you'll do a lot of in bonsai, so you'll wire and unwire and rewire and unwire to try and get shape. So you don't want your wire to stay on too long because the tree will grow and the wire will then bite into the bark, which is not desirable. Okay, so I'm basically now at the end of my wiring. I'll turn that around so you can see it on this angle. I'm also at a point in my branch where I'm going to lose that leaf because there's two branches there anyway, where it's teeing off. So I'm just going to loop my wire back on itself, not because of that tee, but just so the branch can't pop out of it. Okay, I'll come back and finish this other one. So basically supporting it, I'm just going to turn this towards myself a little bit. You won't see it quite as well, but just make it a bit easier for me to do. So I'm supporting the branch the whole time as I'm going. Just trying not to get any of my leaves underneath the wire. So again, I've got two branches here. I'm going to just loosen my wire up a little bit at that point so that the branch is up beneath it or below, lower than it. So I'm basically getting into a point now where my wire is too thick for my branch. Now at points like this, I could, if I really wanted to, wire that very thin branch using my much lighter gauge wire, but I'm not going to worry at this stage. So I will go through and wire up all of my branches off from this tree, and if I had more significant branches shooting off than I have here, I will also wire them out with one of my finer gauges. Okay, so moving up higher, I'm getting into thinner branches, so I'll downsize my wire. So these two branches really aren't a match for each other. So what I'm going to do here is go for my very thin wire, and I'm just going to brace it against the main trunk. So literally just getting in and get a first start. Because these branches are very thin, this is actually one I cracked in my last video, I've just realised. Because they're very thin, they are easy to snap, so given I've already snapped it, I don't know if I'll be very successful here, but I'm just going to go a little bit around the trunk. and carefully try and work up that branch without doing any more damage than I already have. So trying hard to support it where the crack is. Now with these really thin branches, you can tend to just do, rather than being even tight on it, you can do quite a loose wrap around, so it's almost like a spring around it. So I'll just get in there and come back on itself. So I think I did that without breaking it further. Yes, I have. Yep, that's fine. So I basically, with that one, I've braced down the trunk because there's not a lot of tension going to be on that branch, and very carefully up the branch. And the top couple there, they're too thick for my thinnest wire, so I'll do them with my roughly 1mm wire. So about there and there. So my plan from the top of my tree will be that this will be my new top branch, and this will be a side branch. So where my trunk used to go up that way, it's now going to kick off into this direction, and that will be pulled down. Okay, so for this tree, I'm not going to wire further out onto these branches. I'm going to let them grow out and thicken, so I can now start to manipulate the tree. So just bearing in mind my front was where this head was, so I'm going to turn that to face me just so that I can see what I'm doing. So I basically want branches to give the illusion of age. Branches tend to pull down a little bit with age. They don't shoot up like a new growth tends to. So we've got new growth shooting straight up. Mature growth will be down like that. So I'm going to be maneuvering them, but I'm also going to be pulling branches so that they come a little bit forward and then possibly bend back. It somehow makes the tree a little bit more welcoming if the branches aren't all just pulling away from you, if they're not coming straight at you but coming a little bit towards you. So I'm just going to go through and do that. So again, I'm supporting the branch as I go, and I'm pulling this one down and toward me, and then I'm going to give it a bit of movement. So I'm going to go back up a touch and back a little bit. The next one up is coming probably too far forward, so I'm going to swing that one back a bit. And maybe up a little. And you can get as creative as you like depending on the style you want. You might want to sort of swing them around so they're windswept. You might want to dip down so they're cascading. It's really up to you, but you can move them a fair bit if you're gentle. If you start to get a bit of cracking, leave it for a couple of days and you can come back and move a little bit more. But yeah, it's basically, I find if I look at a tree, you just sort of move a little bit, you think, nah, not quite what I wanted, so you just gradually manipulate those branches to where you want them to be. It's often nice where you've got a bend, so I don't have a branch in the right spot here, but if I had a branch there on the outside of a bend, it's often nice to have it because it accentuates that bend. So I don't have a lot of back branches on this at the moment, so hopefully I'll get some that will grow in and fill that space a little bit. So you can actually, more commonly if you have a branch that's at the back where you need one on the side, you can pull it a fair bit forward and around to the side, so like I'm pulling this one a little bit towards the front. And you can fill in, but you won't tend to do that if your branch is on the front and you want to fill in a side or a back. Okay, so I'm not wrapped in that, but I'll play with that given a bit of time and reshape and things like that. I think that needs a bit more separation from that one to balance out these, or actually I think I might push that one around to the back a bit more. Just being careful. So ideally my wire should be over the front now because I've changed my mind, but we'll just leave it at that for the moment. So that's just giving me a bit more back depth. So not great, but I'll play with that later. At the top of my tree I have given the new main trunk the height and offshot what was higher than it off to the side, and eventually we'll fill all of this in with leaves and you won't see much of that. But the key is our front should be pretty much void of branches, and we want to try and get branches going left, right, ideally back, left, right, back. So something I could do looking at that is I could actually make this one my back branch, and that still won't be quite balanced, or I could try and make that a back branch. I might just have a quick play with that. Try not to snap it because my wire's on the wrong side of it. So I won't push it all the way back because I think I will damage that. But so yeah, it's not looking right, but anyway, I'll play around with that after. It's just to show you the actual wiring technique. But yeah, just basically position your branches so you've got some nice flowing movement in them. Put them where you think they should be. It's not locked in place. You can move these progressively as you feel that they need to be tweaked. Just as long as you've got your wire done reasonably well, not crushing any of your leaves. Alright, so we'll jump onto a different tree now. Okay, so this tree, let's adjust the camera down a tad, was a tube stock, so I've literally just taken it straight, put it into a $2 pot, which just is a decorative but very low cost pot, but for tube stock it's a suitable size for it to grow out. And I've already pre-wired it, so it was a dead straight tree, and using 2 pieces of 1mm wire, I have done 2 wraps going all the way up, or halfway up, and then continue with just one, so that instead of trying to use my thicker wire, I have a nice, easy to bend around the small branches double wire. And all I've done then is basically put a lot of movement into the tree, so just sort of bent it in a semi-spiral shape as I go up and a little bit left and right. And as that thickens up, that very significant bend will become less visible given time. So I'm not going to wire down any of my outer branches at the moment. I could if I really wanted to, but I'm happy just to let that thicken up a little bit and see where it goes on its own. So given we're sort of heading into the slowdown time of growth as we get towards the end of summer, but I'll probably leave that on there for 3 months and just remove the wire from there, because it will, hopefully the trunk will have swollen a bit and it won't cause too much damage, and it should stay reasonably well set in that position, and I'll rewire at that point and start to do some of my outer branches. Okay, so for this one, this was my $6 unhealthy tree. I have chopped back so that there isn't a lot of remaining growth, and my front will be following up along that angle there, so along like that. I'm not going to apply any wire in the sense of wiring up this tree because these branches are very new and soft. What I'm instead going to do is, taking my thinnest wire, I'm going to literally hook it over and pull branches down, and either hook under the edge or I can put a band around the edge so I can tie onto that. There's various methods I can use. I can even poke holes into the pot where I want a hole like that. So I can then just come in and hook my wire like so. So I'll just grab a, actually I've got these I can use as cutters. Don't really recommend using your branch cutters as cutters, but this thin wire is very soft. So I'm just going to chop a little bit off of there, pull that down to approximately where I want it, and just fold it over. So it's not actually biting it or anything like that, it's literally just holding it down. And I'm going to go through and do that for each of my branches. Let's pull that a little bit further. So I'm just looking at what I could use as a new main branch. So given that I've only got 3 sets of leaves coming out of this, new branches coming out, this one is really in a horrible position if I'm to keep this top branch. I'm going to have to wait and see if I get any growth on that. So I can bring that behind possibly. Where's my front? So that's my front there. I could pull that up behind and make that my new main trunk, although it does come directly at the bottom, so it's not ideal for that. Or I could make this one become my new main. So I really can't see myself using that back and around, so I'm going to say that this will be my main upper branch. So I'm going to very, very carefully place some wire around that. So what I'll be doing is an extremely loose, so it's not even really holding it, it's just like a spring going up there. And I'm barely putting any pressure on the branch as I go so I don't crush the leaves. And just fold it back in on itself. And then down here, sorry about my arm in the way, I am just going to fold it back around the trunk. So I can now point that pretty much straight up and give it some movement. So you should be able to see on that I've really not wrapped on the branch. I'm just doing a spring style so the branch sits loosely in between it, but on a thin branch like this that's enough to hold it. And then on this branch I think I'll just pull it towards the back. So I'm going to spin around and put a small hole in the top of my pot somewhere back here, so somewhere over this side. And because I do want a little bit of a shape in this, I'm actually going to wire similar to what I did that top branch. Okay, so I can basically go back and find my front. There it is. Okay, so I've got my branch pulling back and I can start to shape it around from there. So it's pulling back, but I can then flick it out or up or whatever I want from that point. And just wait for it to thicken up before I really do some real work on it. But that will start to pull it in that general direction. And that's all we're doing for that tree. So 3 pieces of wire and that one is done. Okay, so this last tree is one that I've had for a while. It started as tube stock getting towards a year ago, and I upped it into a pot size, and then I've downsized it into this pot size. So I basically thickened up my trunk and branches, and I only threw it in this pot because I had it lying around, and it's still reasonably large for the plant size, so it'll keep on growing. But if you look at this branch or trunk here and this branch back here, you can see that I have some wire biting where I didn't remove my wire soon enough. So that's something you just want to be careful of, that you don't do. But what I'm going to do for this one is just show you some forward and backward. So this is my new main trunk. So these branches on the side, I want either being forward or backward. I don't want them shooting up. So I'll just go through and do that very quickly and show you the end result.